don't like Ta-Nehisi Coates. I genuinely blame. I think he might be the godfather of a lot of the race problems that we have today. I don't. That's not an exaggeration in terms of his that essay, "The Case for Reparations," single-handedly radicalized every white girl on a college campus who eventually ended up working at the New York Times, behest of the BLM movement, of all this other nonsense that we have today. So I really do find him a villain in American politics. That said, I don't even like him, and I would not open with a question like that because that's wild. It would be an interrogation of the book itself, and not to say something like that would belong. What did he say in an extremist
The backpack of an extremist.
That's an insane thing to say.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I got up and I was minding my own business, doing some things I needed to do in the house, and then Saagar and Enjeti, pathetic take on breaking points, triggered me because there were so many things about it that was wrong, that the little bit of respect that I have had for this guy, that he tries to be somewhat honest, even though when somebody that's in the Republican Party says that Josh Hawley is a good candidate for president, you already know that it's over with. Having said that, the big news item that's happening right now in the United States and mainstream media is the fact that Ta-Nehisi Coates has written this book. And in the book, he has a section in it that talks about his experiences in Hebron and other parts of Israel, of seeing what was going on with Gaza. He had a Palestinian gentleman that was showing him around the area. And he had an interview on CBS network with Tony Dokoupil and two silent Black people that I'll get back to later. One, Gail King, and another one, a gentleman that used to be on, he used to be a wide receiver actually in the NFL. And you could see when Black people have been kind of told not to say anything, and you'll see it in that interview. Anyway, Tony Dokoupil basically says to Ta-Nehisi Coates that if I take away your name, if I take away your known entitlements that people know you as a great writer, this could be something that was written by terrorists. And Ta-Nehisi pushes back on that and says, hey, look, I'm only talking about what my experiences were, seeing what is an actual apartheid system in Israel in regarding to the Palestinians. All right. So now Saagar Enjeti is on his show with Crystal Ball called Breaking Points, and he's talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates. And he makes this statement, well, 2 or 3 things he said. One, he said that Ta-Nehisi Coates is like the beginning of racism in the country and triggered white female college students. Where he gets those connective tissues, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. And it was in regards to reparations. And for some reason or another, if you look at the historical situation with Black people in this country, from slavery to Jim Crow, the depth of destruction to the Black community continues to this very day, and it's provable in data. It's completely provable in data. So much so, I came across an article recently where the conversation that first appeared in the United States about a universal health program goes back to the 1920s or 30s. And the people that were discussing it, the captains of industry, the people that were in power, the most powerful politicians in both parties, there were people within each one of those groups that said, we cannot do this because it's going to help Black people. And we can't have that. And you look at Saagar Enjeti, and he's a reflection of that attitude. Here's a man who has he's an East Indian man. He's an East Indian bloodline. Even if he was born in this country, he personally relates to white people in this country. If you're white, it's all right. If you are a black person, then there's some kind of little switch or some kind of little special thing that has to be in play here. Then he turns around and he says, oh, a black man, George Floyd, was killed and by one white cop, and now the whole thing. No, this is something that's been going on for a very long time. And if you knew the true history of African American people in this country, you would know that. And it was a response. And the biggest thing that most of the media outlets had never talked about, and when I did a deep dive into Derek Chauvin, the police officer that was convicted of murdering George Floyd, it turns out that he knew George Floyd. And a lot of you people out there may not know that. And you can look it up. The man was working as a part time security at a popular club in Minnesota. And the guy that seemed to be very beloved by a lot of people there was George Floyd and not Derek Chauvin. And in the event, in the moment, in the day that Derek Chauvin put his knee on this man's neck for the 11 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever it was that it ultimately killed him, he knew who he was. So for you to be talking the way you're talking, you're completely talking out of your ass, Saagar. I really strongly suggest that you go and gather all your data, because you're a guy who professes how much that you love data. There's a lot of real data out there. There's real data on the estimated amount of African Americans who have come to this country as slaves. There's an estimated amount of data regarding the amount of Black people that were murdered in this country all the way up to and through Jim Crow. There's data regarding people who were lynched. And for you that might not know what lynching is, it's when someone takes a rope and puts it around your neck and hangs you from a tree until you're dead. And there's actual photographic evidence of that. So if there was ever a group of people that have existed in this country that deserve reparations, both in what has happened in the past with slavery and Jim Crow and lynchings, then we can go to redlining. We can go to people getting a GI Bill in the 1940s and then making sure that Black soldiers who served in World War II distinguishedly, they don't get the GI Bill to get themselves a home. And Tony Dokoupil, of all people on CBS, that interviewed Ta-Nehisi Coates, talked about that last year on one of his shows, talking about how much his grandfather got from the GI Bill, and then he found out later that Black people weren't allowed. You can look at every aspect of American life, and this is the reason why we don't have generational wealth in the Black community. This is the reason why the Republican Party and many people, even in the Democratic Party, go out of their way not to put money into poor communities. And this is not just in that regard. It's kind of a weird shift that happens, because when you start talking about economics, people only look at it in terms of race, when you should look at it in economic form alone. There are plenty of white people that are poor. The vast majority of people that get aid, government aid, are white, just by the pure preponderance that there was more white people in the country. But you never want to talk about that. So if you go on to Fox News and you look into a moron like Jesse Waters or Mark Levin or all the bums they have on Fox News, they make it sound that the only people that get welfare or get any kind of government assistance are Black or Latino or immigrants or illegal immigrants. Let's deal with facts as they are. The vast majority of people are white that get this. And here's the thing, that the most crucial and critical part of the death of Martin Luther King, and by that same note, Malcolm X and other people at the time of the 60s in this very turbulent moment of civil rights, is that Martin Luther King had a breakthrough going to Appalachia and talking to white people and telling them, hey, you know what? You're, and I'm going to say the more accepted word, you're Negroes too. Because when it comes to the concepts of capitalism and the concepts of how people are taken care of, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And the people at the very top that make decisions about economics in the United States, they are acutely aware of that, and they still chose to try to extract every cent, every piece of blood out of the common working person to the point where they take your jobs away altogether and send them to Mexico, send them to China, send them to the Philippines in Southeast Asia operations, to Brazil, all because they want cheap labor and they don't want to pay people a fair wage. All these things, all these elements culminate together to what it is we have today. You got high crime in these cities across the United States. It's because you have young people who are not getting the level of education they need, and they're not having resources go to the communities that are the poorest. I heard a number recently that 650,000 Americans are homeless today. But now we know that there's been an investigation in several different cities where apartment complexes are using an AI software that will price fix all the apartments to a certain height. So no matter what apartment complex you go to, you won't be able to negotiate a price or get a good price because the AI software that they're using has set this price at a high price. And this is where we start talking about government regulation and what that really means and the importance of it in a democratically ran system. And it's the unfortunate part is there's so much gross corruption within the American system, it's impossible to be able to have a proper level of regulation. And all these different aspects affect what it is that we see on the ground today. The guy like Saagar and Enjeti does not understand any of those aspects that I've just mentioned. And this is the reason why he didn't come to a conclusion that makes no sense to the reality of what Black people's lives have been in this country. We have to come together and understand that the person that has the least needs to be the person that we think about the most. And if we don't do that, the beauty and the certain aspects of what America is going to be long crushed forever. And we will truly have the Hunger Games. I beg of you to look up this video that's on Breaking Points with Saagar and Enjeti and the conversation that was made, and also to write your your congressman and your people in your district and try to get the thing that's the elephant in the room, and that is the money that's being spent on the war in Israel and in Ukraine. We need to bring these conflicts to an end. We need to take the monies that we have from uh, uh, giving to these countries and give it to the people that are in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida that are going through what they're going through. We need an infrastructure bill that is robust, that deals with the onslaught of climate change and these massive storms that are happening now. We have to think of a whole new way in which we do building, our building codes, our ability to build a building that possibly could be 3D printed out of concrete that would withstand gale force winds and a person could still come back and have their house intact. So there's a lot on the table, and we need to take all these details, pull them together, and throw out the garbage. like lobbying, for example. Lobbying is destroying our country. So I got a little bit off topic. I can't help myself sometimes, but the main point of this video is for you to look at what Mr. Ta-Nehisi Coates has done. His book, I would highly recommend you read the book. I haven't had the opportunity to read it myself. I've read excerpts from it, but you're really talking about criticizing apartheid and criticizing apartheid wherever it may exist. And we still have our own form of apartheid. And Mr. Saagar Enjeti's attitude about Ta-Nehisi Coates, about being against reparations, is an example of a person coming or having bloodline from overseas, and everybody here is an immigrant in some kind of way, except for Black folks and the indigenous Indian people. We need to have a conversation about what's really taking place and how we can solve these issues.